Hello, my name is Thane and I like to experiment with AI art. Recently someone commented that they would have liked to see some of my experiment results without a comma as well. I tried that and went even further than that. I decided to look at many different separators to see what makes a difference and what does not. I selected 3 combinations of only 2 words. I wanted to keep it relatively simple and just try some things out. So the 2 words are always the same for each of the prompts. The combinations I chose for this video are Celestial Jungle, Monochromatic Portrait, and Psytrance Fantasy. I usually separate the words or combinations in my prompts with comma and space between them. And I did add -- no text comma mockup to reduce the occurrence of text and people holding a picture or something like that. It doesn't always work like intended, but it does most of the time. I also used the same seed number for each of the images, because it would be really difficult to tell if something is different when using different separators if there is a random seed number assigned for each generation. So to prevent that, I used -- seed 777. And 777 is just a number that I have randomly selected. So whenever I specify it myself in a prompt, it means that I override the random seed number that Midjourney would have assigned to it. And now I also know exactly what the seed number is right away without having to look it up for each image grid. And of course for each prompt I set the aspect ratio with --916. This is another parameter that I for some reason prefer. It does make it easier to compare 3 images side by side in a video. And as I want to stick to the latest currently available version of Midjourney, I have specified --V5. You can also set it with /settings and selecting version 5 as your preferred version. Let's first look at each of the words separately and with their combination. So here is Celestial Jungle and Celestial Jungle with a comma. Notice also the lower and uppercase letters in the prompts. For Celestial we get almost like a starry sky that looks kind of weird to me. For Jungle we get a green and misty jungle path with lots of plants everywhere. But Celestial, Jungle does this kind of imagery. It looks completely different from its word counterparts and it even is in a completely different style as well. Kind of graphic where the words by themselves were in photographic style. The second example is Monochromatic Portrait and Monochromatic Portrait. Monochromatic has some people dressed in black, white and grey. Portraits give various people as the result, some in photographic style, some might even be in photorealism style. But when combined, these words produce black and white portrait photography. And the third example is Psytrance Fantasy and Psytrance Fantasy. 2 of my ever-favorite styles combined. Psytrance tends to produce really colorful images of painted or decorated people at some kind of parties. And Fantasy creates all kinds of castles in various styles. So as we have established the defaults, let's see what happens when we play around with the capitalization of the words, uppercase letters and lowercase letters. Here is again what I normally prompt. And here is the result when I used the same prompt, but just changed all of the letters to lowercase. The results are identical. The same happens when all the letters are in uppercase. Now let's look at what happens when removing the space after the comma. And it does not change anything in the resulting images, it is considered as exactly the same prompt by Midjourney. I think based on this, if you have any separator between your words, the additional space does not make a difference. The space by itself can be considered too as a separator. So leaving out a comma does change things. Over half of the images look different. There are some similarities that can be observed though, so it is my subjective opinion here. All the jungle images have a lot more contrast, but if you look closely, The outlines and positions of objects are observably very similar at times. The portrait images don't have any of the same faces at all, the look of the images is pretty much. And psytrance fantasy images have only one image that is clearly a variation of the same image. Others may be similar in color, but I would consider them as totally different looking images. Leaving out the space altogether also drastically changes the outcome. Jungle images look prettier, but they do seem to have similar elements in similar locations. Portraits have entirely different faces. And psytrance fantasy goes almost abstract in some images. All the images look completely different, yet quite similar at the same time. From here on out, I think everything starts to alter the results ever so slightly. So even a simple thing like changing the order of the words results in different results. For jungle images the changes are very subtle, there's more starry sky and one image now has an additional border. For portrait images, one of the faces is actually recognizable, but three are completely different. And psytrance fantasy has gone towards more realistic images. So I guess this means that the myth is true that changing the order of your words does impact your end results. Now let's look at the use cases for colon. In Midjourney, double colon is used for multi-prompting. Each double colon splits your prompt to equal parts of prompts. And end result is basically blending the prompts together. You can assign numeric weights to the prompt parts to emphasize one or other more. But obviously this does result in different images, which may even be the most drastic change to be seen in this video. All of the images get a totally different feel and look to them. Jungles are more misty jungles and the celestial part seems to have gotten a little bit lost. Actually, the portrait may also be a little bit lessened with monochromatics showing up more. And psytrance fantasy is also leaning more towards the psytrance side. Definitely different. Leaving just a single colon between the words takes us back towards what I normally do. It breaks the multi-prompt and the colon is just another separator like comma. I like all of the images, although I am not too happy about the celestial jungle becoming a board game. Psytrance fantasy seems to have gravitated towards fantasy worlds this time. Next up, let's look at parentheses. There is many different ways to use parentheses in a prompt and it looks like they alter the outcome each time. Obviously, I did not test all of the possibilities as there are so many. The first example is one single left parenthesis separating the two prompt words. It completely changes the style for the jungle images. And for some reason all images have a person or an animal in them. But using the right parenthesis makes the images look totally different from the left parenthesis. And using both at the same time between the words gives yet another different result. I am struggling to see the logic here, just that one single character changes some of the images drastically. Here I tried surrounding the first word with parentheses. Starting to think that Midjourney just reads the parenthesis character as text without recognizing what it is. And then just simply reads it as another word that is kind of gibberish to depict. Here I have surrounded the second word in parentheses. This result looks vaguely similar to the single left parenthesis between the words. At least for the jungle images. I kind of like what this combination did, all the images look great. But surrounding both words with parentheses kind of ruins the jungle images for me. Monochromatic and portrait are both such strong words it doesn't really do much except change the faces. And psytrance fantasy is kind of all over the place, good but nothing new I guess. Let's see brackets now. I know there exist also curly brackets, but I have not included those in this video. Because I think they have actually been assigned a purpose now with the permutations feature. Starting out with a single left bracket. And actually, it has a lot of similarities to the single left parenthesis. The single right bracket looks a lot better, but oddly doesn't share similarities to either single right bracket or single right parenthesis. Both brackets in the middle give similar shapes to the single right brackets. But I actually love what's happened to these images: more contrast, color, atmosphere for some reason. And when putting the first word of the prompt in brackets, this is the result. Compared to what we just looked at, I don't like this. Second word in brackets is just slightly better. I don't like that it still generates text on a few of the images despite the negative prompts that have been included already. And both words surrounded with brackets gives this result. It's better than just surrounding one word with brackets. Another symbol that is usually used in multiple places is quotation mark. Starting off with a single quotation mark as a separator between words. I feel like the images have slightly more contrast to them and possibly detail too. Yes, I was looking at the wrinkles on the ladies. 2 quotation marks between the words definitely changes the images. I guess it now depends on the subject. I really like a few of the psytrance fantasy images, the ones on the right. But Celestial Jungle is just awful. And monochromatic portraits are just starting to look the same for me at this point already. I really like these results. This was surrounding the first word with quotation marks. And this was surrounding the second word with quotation marks. For the first time it looks like this jostled the monochromatic portrait away from photographic style. But the rest of the images are kind of similar to what we've seen before already. From here on out we will be looking at a single separator only between the 2 prompt words. Now that we've covered that, let's turn our attention to the period symbol. Period. A punctuation mark used to indicate the end of a sentence or abbreviation, and to signal a full stop in written language. I feel like I have seen some of the images already before, but there are some alterations. Again, not so happy about the Celestial Jungle images. Semicolon. A punctuation mark used to separate independent clauses in a sentence or to separate items in a list that already contain commas. Definitely again something that is different yet similar at the same time. It's getting harder to tell which symbols have similarities and which do not, because there doesn't seem to be a definitive logic to it. Each subject and each image seems to behave in a slightly different way. Dash. A punctuation mark used to separate phrases, indicate an interruption in thought, or for emphasis. I like the bottom right psytrance fantasy image. The fish swimming around is a nice touch. Jungle images are all bad. Again, so similar and yet there are differences. Question mark. A punctuation mark used to indicate a direct question or inquiry. And I am starting to question my sanity as I try to understand how these symbols change the prompts. But the question mark does seem to do significant changes, which I really do like. Portraits are looking as good as ever, so I am basing my opinions more on the jungle and psytrance fantasy images. Okay, jungle has some text and borders and things in a couple of images. Exclamation mark. A punctuation mark used to indicate strong feelings, excitement, or emphasis. And I strongly feel that this symbol does not improve the images. I think they don't look that good. Okay, the portrait images are the exception again. Slash. A punctuation mark used to indicate a separation or a choice between alternatives, or to represent a fraction. Slight changes again. I've seen these images before I think, but they're not obviously similar to any one other separator. Celestial Jungle is doing products again. Ampersand. A symbol representing the word and used to join words or phrases together. I don't see this symbol impacting the results in a meaningful way. Portraits are as gorgeous as ever, Psytrance does nice stuff, and Jungle did nail polish. I guess it doesn't use this symbol in a way that computer language or logical expressions do. Midjourney probably reads this symbol's assigned numerical value or something like that. Asterisk. A symbol used to indicate a footnote, omission, or to draw attention to a particular point. But probably just a random value for Midjourney that alters the images slightly, but again not in a very significant way to be certain that Midjourney recognizes this symbol. %. A symbol used to indicate a portion or fraction of 100. I don't think the images are 100% different from what we've seen so far, but there is a slight difference. Seems to be a better change, no nail polish anymore. $. A symbol used to represent a unit of currency or money. For some reason there is a lot more wrappers among the images. Psytrance Fantasy still looks kind of unaffected. Hashtag. A symbol used to categorize or tag a post on social media, typically followed by a keyword or phrase. For some reason I feel that many of these images look prettier than the ones without this symbol. @. A symbol used to indicate an email address or to connect usernames in social media. And it does seem to lean heavily towards social media and event posters. I feel these images are mostly worse looking than the ones with other symbols. So I think that there is some meaning assigned to some of the symbols. +. A mathematical symbol used to indicate addition, also used in computer programming and other applications. All of the images look different with this symbol as well, but I would not consider it to have any significant effect on the images. =. A mathematical symbol used to indicate equality between two values or expressions. But it is not equal to other symbols we've seen. The most noticeable difference comes from the Psytrance Fantasy images this time. I love the fantastical worlds it has created instead of just the ornate and swirly portraits of women. Tilde. A symbol resembling a wavy line, used in various contexts such as in Spanish to indicate a different pronunciation or in computing to represent negation or approximation. And it seems to produce quite lovely images. The most change can probably be seen in the monochromatic portrait faces. Variations of the other images we've probably already seen before. \. A symbol used in computing and mathematics as an escape character or to indicate division or fractions. But it looks like yet another symbol to me that does change the images a little bit, but not necessarily for the better for all prompts. Vertical bar. A punctuation mark in the form of a straight line used in mathematics and computing to indicate logical or absolute value. The images are starting to look so similar to me it's hard to tell the difference. And yet this symbol does generate quite different images. But some of them look the same as many other symbols have generated. Caret. A symbol used in mathematics, computing, and other fields to indicate exponentiation, XOR, and other operations. But in Midjourney's eyes it is just another symbol or possibly just another word. Ellipsis. A series of 3 dots used to indicate the omission of words or a pause in speech or writing. And for some reason it makes the images prettier. I would almost compare it to the results of hashtag, just with starrier sky for jungle and different people in the portrait images. For some reason the Psytrance Fantasy images look almost the same for hashtag and ellipsis. M-. A punctuation mark used to indicate a break in thought or to set off a parenthetical element in a sentence. But it is yet another symbol that does change the image generation outcome, but not so much that I would recommend using it in a prompt for any purpose. N-. A punctuation mark used to indicate a range or connection between two values or elements. But the results from this are kind of confusing. Portraits still look basically the same with different face. Jungle images are quite different with some animals and text on images. But psytrance fantasy images are really nice. Interrobang. A punctuation mark combining the question mark and exclamation mark used to indicate a mixture of questioning and exclamation. With one exception in the jungle, all of the images seem to look very nice with this symbol. I especially like lower right psytrance fantasy image with the cool mushroom forest. Irony mark. A symbol used to indicate a statement that is intended to be understood as meaning the opposite of its literal interpretation. I guess the irony here is that all the prompt texts turned out weird and I have no idea how to fix them. So this symbol might affect my video editing software as well. The images look mostly quite nice, especially the psytrance fantasy ones. Although I swear I have seen those images before already as results of using other symbols as word separators. Pilcrow. A typographical symbol used to indicate a new paragraph or section break in a text. And it doesn't really change the images in a significant way. Section sign. A typographical symbol used to indicate a section break in legal documents and academic writing. It is becoming typically different. Although it is curious how this is the only symbol so far that has made the hair on the women more curly or wavy. Registered trademark symbol. A symbol used to indicate that a particular word, phrase, or logo is a registered trademark. And what it does to images is turn the celestial jungle to some kind of product, add older and wrinklier people to portraits and add more fantasy worlds to psytrance fantasy images. I like those, and that fantasy castle is new and awesome on the top left. Copyright symbol. A symbol used to indicate that a particular work is protected by copyright. It definitely generates some different images that don't look like all the other symbols at all. Jungle images are still products though. Trademark symbol. A symbol used to indicate that a particular word, phrase, or logo is a trademark. The resulting images kind of feel like registered trademark, but not entirely, a lot of differences though. Dagger. Another set of great images with the tiny exception of text in the jungle images. I feel like I have seen the psytrance images in some place before, and irony mark I think is the closest. Double dagger. A typographical symbol used to indicate a second footnote or reference in a text. Not so good as the dagger. Pretty okay, but I guess just another symbol and nothing else. Bullet point. A typographical symbol used to indicate a list item in a text. But another symbol on the list that is showing some typical differences. Nothing amazing. Degree symbol. A typographical symbol used to indicate degrees of measurement, temperature, or angles. It is slightly better than an average symbol, meaning that it produces nice-looking images. But the changes look like they are again very typical and don't really depend on the meaning of the symbol. Prime symbol. A typographical symbol used to indicate feet and inches in measurements, and minutes and seconds in time. Oddly, this does really nice-looking images that are almost different from the typical differences. Apostrophe. A punctuation mark used to indicate the omission of letters or numbers, possession, or contractions in written language. It looks so very similar to the prime symbol, but the results are like night and day. I did prefer the prime symbol though. Underscore. A symbol used to represent a space or to connect words in a compound phrase or file name. I love what it's done to the jungle images. Psytrance fantasy images are nice too, although half of the images we've seen already so many times with just tiny variations. But that was the last of the separators and symbols I tested out. It did get so repetitive in the end that I would not volunteer to do this again in the near future. But at least you now know what happens if you use something else instead of a comma or space between the words of your prompt. There is a link in the description below to a page on my website where I have listed all of these examples in this video with prompts, of course. What I got out of this is that I like what happened with the ellipsis, underscore, Interrobang and a few others. And I know what I definitely should not use in my prompts if I don't want Midjourney to totally ignore my negative prompts. I hope you found this topic useful to you in your prompting. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to my channel. And I always appreciate all likes and comments too. So let's continue prompting.